ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. William Small, your money mentor, and I'm the founder of DrWill Enterprises and the host of Wealth Builder Seminars in Dallas, Texas. I hold a PhD in biblical studies, and I've written over 10 Bible-based business books, and I've helped hundreds of people quit their jobs or start businesses or earn extra income by working from home. The information in my videos is better than what you would receive in some of the best business schools in the country. Now, I'm sharing this empirical knowledge with you for free, and the only thing that I need you to do in return for me is to subscribe to this channel and share these videos with your family and friends. Now, if you are ready to get all of the information that you need to become an entrepreneur right away, you can go to my website and download my ebook, Preparing for Entrepreneur Excellence. And those who do will be glad you did. All right, amen. Now, this video is titled, What is a Minority? And I pray this presentation will increase your knowledge about what a minority actually is and why Black people should never allow themselves to be called a minority. God gave us the capacity to call things that be not as though they were. And Adam gave a name to every animal, plant, and insect, and bird, and fish in the garden, and they have been called that ever since. And if you allow someone to give you a name, you will eventually become what you are called. And if you continue to allow yourself and your children to be called a minority, you will always be a minor economically, and then someone else will always have to provide jobs for your people to feed their families and raise their children. So let's dive right into this so that we can discover together what a minority actually is. Now, the words in our language shape our culture, okay? And the way that we understand words serve to position us within that culture. Therefore, it is critical that we have the correct meaning of words so that we can position ourselves properly. And if we allow other people to determine what words mean, they will have the power to dictate the way that we perceive and position ourselves, and then we will become their minors or Class B dependents until we learn to break free from their captivity. In order to discover what words actually mean, you have to use syllabication or etymology. Now, etymology is the process of discovering what a word actually means based on how it was first used. The meaning of words change over time because people begin to use the same word in different ways. So this is why you will find in the dictionary that one word can have several different meanings. And that is because the dictionary does not actually tell you what words mean, it only tells you how words are commonly used. Etymology tells you what words actually mean. Now, syllabication tells you what words actually mean also. However, syllabication is a process of breaking words down into syllables and using etymology to discover the original word that syllable came from, what that really means, and then putting those syllables back together to reveal the word's true meaning. Now, the word minority, for example, when broken down by syllable, gives you three parts: minor, I, and tie. Now, the original meaning for the word minority means inferior in importance, size, or degree. The original meaning of I in this context means one who is graded or rated as complete, or someone who is aware of their personal identity. And the original meaning of the syllable tie means quality, state, condition, or degree. And when you put these syllables together, you get the true meaning of the word minority, which is someone who is aware that their personal identity is graded or rated as incomplete, as in 3/5 human, and inferior in importance, quality, condition, or degree. By that definition, the word minority, Jews should be called a minority, yet they refuse to call themselves or allow their children to be labeled a minority. They are in fact a minority, so why do they get to be called a religious or ethnic group? And it's because Jews understand that it matters what you call a thing, and whatever you call a thing, that is what it will become. Sun Tzu, the author of The Art of War, said, anything that has a physical form can be named, and anything that you can name can be conquered. The supreme art of war, he said, is to defeat your enemy without fighting. It does not matter if a young Black man is good. What matters is what he's called and how he's perceived. If you call a child a bad little bastard all of his life and he perceives himself to be a bastard, he'll grow up to be a bastard. But if you call your child great and she perceives herself to be great, she will grow up to be great. If we allow our children to be called a minority, they will begin to perceive that they are someone who is incomplete and inferior in importance, quality, condition, or degree. Now let's examine the word disadvantaged syllabically. because this word helps to keep us positioned in the economy and in the culture as minorities. The word disadvantage is comprised of the prefix dis and the word advantage. The prefix dis has three original meanings. Number one, to do the opposite of, two, to deprive of, and three, to exclude or expel from. The word advantage means superiority of position or condition. The word disadvantage is so powerful that once you assemble the original words back together, you get three original meanings. One of which is one who's been deprived of their position or condition of superiority. Number two, one who has been excluded or expelled from their position or condition of superiority. And number three, one who acts as if he never had a position or condition of superiority. Black children are born geniuses. They are born bigger, stronger, faster, and better than children from other cultures. However, we have been calling our children disadvantaged for so long that they act as if they never had a position or condition of superiority. We have been calling our own children a minority for so long that they act as if they are incomplete and inferior in importance, quality, condition, or degree. We've allowed other cultures to take our supremacy by being suckered into calling things that be not as though they were. We have linguistically positioned ourselves in the economy as minors, therefore we constantly remain dependents, needed to be provided for economically, because we allow our detractors to bamboozle us into calling ourselves a minority. I was watching a prison documentary where this black inmate was guiding the documenters through the facility, and they were asking him all kinds of questions about life in prison, and then they got around to asking him about how he got there. And he told them about his life of petty crimes, robbery, and burglary, and then they asked him about his father. And he said, I never met my father, so I don't know anything about him except what my mom told me. And she always said that he was a no-good jailbird and that I was just like him. Dr. King said that little black children are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority above their heads. And how did this happen, okay? It happened because we positioned our children under these clouds. It happened because we used the language of our detractors to define our condition, which makes our children grow up in this position. We allow our children to be called a minority, which gives them a label of inferiority, but it's not entirely our fault because we are psychologically conditioned to use the oppressor's language from the first days of elementary education. Now, I used to volunteer in public schools and work with 3rd and 4th grade boys because that's the age where they start to identify with gangs. And I was studying the public school demographics in this predominantly black city one day. I noticed that the data said minority students 74% and majority students 24%. Now this struck me powerfully because I had to search for the answer to the question, how did the students who are the majority in terms of population get labeled as majority? And why does the group of students who are in fact the minority in terms of population get called the majority? This led me to know that I needed to understand what a minority really is and define it based on what it really is and recognize how it really works rather than the way that our oppressor defines it. Now, once you realize that words like minority and disadvantage are used in a way to make you believe that you are minor or inferior, you'll be able to break out of economic oppression and be mentally and spiritually free to build wealth for your family. Brothers and sisters, it's time that we come to the realization that it's not just our detractor that is staining black people with the perception of inferiority. We have been programmed to use the detractor's language to perpetuate inferiority upon ourselves. The premise of the Willie Lynch program was that if white men oppressed black men long enough, we would begin to oppress ourselves. And it's not hard to see that the program is still working today in how we oppress ourselves. And we can't just blame this outcome on young people and rappers and entertainers either, because it's happening on every level. The next time you hear a so-called black professional, preacher, or politician refer to our children as disadvantaged, ask them, why are you calling these children disadvantaged? Demand to know from them if they understand what the word disadvantage actually means. See if they know that it means one who has had their advantage taken away. And if a person is currently disadvantaged, it means that they once had an advantage. So ask these so-called professionals, how did our children who were originally born with a distinct advantage become disadvantaged? Black children are born geniuses, but somewhere between parenting, schooling, and cultural conditioning, they become intellectually lazy. Now, why is it that the average black adolescent won't read much more than their text messages or Instagram feed? Adolescence is the time where people are the most intellectually curious, and young people begin searching for answers and the reason why things are the way that they are in an effort to make society and their circumstances better. Now, something happened to stifle our young people's desire to search for these answers themselves. They have been conditioned to look for woke or conscious people to give them the answers rather than finding the internal drive to discover how to change society for their generation. They look for other people to tell them what to do. Now, how did this happen? Our detractors understand that black people are born bigger, stronger, faster, and better. They know that if a white child and a black child are given an equal opportunity, that black child is going to beat that white kid every time. So in order to take away the black child's advantage, they put a governor on him to inhibit his power. The government requires car making companies to put a governor on the car's engine so that it cannot go more than 120 or 150 miles an hour. Racism and oppression serve as a governor to inhibit a black child's power physically, and culture and language work like a governor to inhibit a black child's power intellectually. Dr. King said that a man can't ride your back unless you bend over, and it's time that we straighten up our backs, okay? White supremacy is an attempt to take or claim the position or condition that belongs to black people. And when a man knows that he's supreme, he don't have to go around shouting and trying to convince people that he's superior. Whenever a man has to tell you that he's superior, it means he knows that he's not, okay? There's a reason the men who claim to be superior are the same ones who stockpile assault weapons and bullets, and they have more guns than they got kids, okay? They want guns that can kill masses of black men quickly because they are afraid of what we will do to them once we finally realize that we are born superior. When black people in South Africa took their country back from the white men who oppressed them, they didn't kill them, take their babies, or start raping white ladies. So white men need to understand that black men in America are not and never were the animals that you have made us out to be. Therefore, we are not going to do to you what you have done to us. Your fear of us is born out of the fantasy about us that you created in order to justify oppressing us. Joshua 24:15 says, "And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Soon after delivering this declaration and challenging the men of Israel, Joshua died. God instructed Moses to appoint Joshua to lead the men of Israel. However, God did not tell Joshua to appoint another man to serve in his leadership position. God had already decentralized the leadership of Israel by separating the 12 tribes and giving each of them a territory to preside over as kings. Now he was making each man responsible to also be the spiritual leader of his family. There are two reasons that God did this. Number one, to make every man the king and priest of his home, and number two, to make it difficult for them to be corrupted or overthrown. God was trying to prevent the men of Israel from being under the influence of one leader. And if this one leader is corrupted and begin to serve other gods, he could influence the other men to do the same. And if this leader turned out to be a coward and gave away his land, he could lead the men of Israel to surrender their land that God gave them to the enemy also. It has been easy for our detractors to hold us in mental, spiritual, and financial captivity because we are constantly seeking a centralized leader or the next Dr. King. Some of the centralized leadership that we look to serve, they serve other gods, okay? And some of those who serve the same God become political and get turned on a dime, and they sell us out for their personal elevation and enrichment. So God has been trying to decentralize the leadership of the black community for a long time and to make every man a king and priest of his own home. And we are the only group that are constantly looking for a leader. Who is the leader of the Asian, Hispanic, and Jewish communities? Okay? Now, if you want to know the truth, Dr. King was a central figure, but he was not a centralized leader. There were actually three leaders of the civil rights movement who had their own areas of responsibility: spiritual, financial, and legal. Dr. King led from the throne room, Thurgood Marshall led in the courtroom, and Whitney Young led the movement in the boardroom. The civil rights movement was successful because these three men were leaders who were not corruptible, but the movement failed after we allowed our detractors to appoint our centralized leaders, and our enemies would give a person whom they corrupted a platform to speak on in order to elevate their position. However, these people were only interested in advancing their personal, political, and financial fortunes instead of the people's. So it's imperative that we stop looking for centralized leaders, particularly in the body of politicians and preachers, okay? Because it's hard to tell a politician from the preacher today, because too many preachers are trying to be politicians, and too many politicians have a lot of God in their mouths trying to sound like preachers. The truth is that politicians have no respect for preachers any longer, because both of them are trying to eat from the same corrupt trough, and they're competing for the same centralized leadership position. And notice whenever they do get the position, they seek to be served rather than to serve. So I don't know about you, but as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. I kind of went off on a tangent a little bit for a minute, so let's get back on message so we can get out of here, okay? One of the ways that our detractors remain in power is through the system of racism. Therefore, we need to take a deep look at racism and define it based on what it really is and how it really works, rather than the way our detractors define it, okay? Now, when you let other people control your language, they can control your ability to be free physically, spiritually, and financially. So we must understand that language determines culture. Okay, and one of the reasons our detractors have had difficulty taking total control of Black culture is the words or language of our culture changes too often. If we agreed with something someone said back in the 70s, we would say right on, and in the 90s we would say word. But today we say 100. Okay, not 100, but 100. Okay, and now even 100 is currently evolving into 100%. Black people drive every area of American culture except for economics and language. So it's time that we begin to take control over the language in America also, so that we can control economics. But in order to win this fight, we must recognize that whenever we try to change the language, they always move to control the narrative. And this is why whenever we say Black Lives Matter, they respond with All Lives Matter. Therefore, we must stop guiding our thinking and actions based on how our detractors use and define words. As long as they control the language, they can control us, okay? So it's imperative that we stop using the oppressors' words in their meetings, because their intent is to keep us confused. We have to live in the oppressor's culture, but we don't have to let the oppressor's culture live in us. You can be in prison, but you don't have to let the prison live in you. See, your body being in prison does not make you a prisoner. You don't become a prisoner until you let the prison get in you. So again, we have to begin defining words and using language in a way that benefits us rather than our oppressors. And the devil's main move to guard against defeat is to create chaos and confusion. And this is how God defeated Satan after he influenced Nimrod to build a tower to reach heaven. God confused the people's language so that they couldn't get into agreement. And this is why the devil's disciples' words never seem to match their actions. That confusion is created by design, because the way that they use words do not mean what we think they mean. Therefore, when they don't do what they say, we just simply call them hypocrites. But the objective is to keep us confused so that we will never learn how to use their words to get ahead in their culture. For example, they say that we're all human, yet they classified us as 3/5 human. They say that we're all human, but whenever they have control of our bodies, they treat us as if we are subhuman. Our oppressors perpetuate the myth that there is a human race and that we are all members of that construct. They always trot out the liberals in their culture to perpetuate this myth after every time a white person has committed an atrocity against a person of color. But the truth is, there is no such thing as a human race in terms of the way that our oppressors define it. If there is a human race as defined by their linguistic construct, it will have to exist in contrast to a non-human race. What is living on earth that is not human according to how our oppressors define human? Animals, plants, and insects, right? But is there an animal race, plant race, or insect race? No. There are species of animals, plants, and insects, but there is no such thing as an animal race, plant race, or insect race. Now, there is such a thing as human and non-human. However, there is no such thing as a human race in terms of how Black people would normally define the words human and race. Now, the way the phrase human race is used in the oppressor's vernacular led me to wonder if they're trying to tell us something, because the devil has a tricky way of hiding the truth out in the open. So it made me curious about the true meanings of the words human and race. The Bible says that God made man from dirt, okay? Therefore, the word human is a combination of the words humus and man, or humus man. Now, I'm saying humus, not hummus, or that spread made from ground up chickpeas. Humus is the black or brown organic part of dirt required to make plants grow. A human or humus man is a black or brown man. A human or human is a man of color. We may all be human in form, but some people who lack color in their skin have demonstrated over centuries that they lack humanity in their being, and they have demonstrated consistently through slavery, Jim Crow, lynching, police brutality, and so on, that they have no compassion whatsoever for human beings or people of color. It appears that they fear that one day we're going to realize that they are not human. Their fear is that one day God will command us to destroy them. Eve was a Black woman and the mother of all human beings, and God told the devil that Eve's seed, or her sons, would crush the heads of his sons. So the devil has been afraid of Black women and her sons from the beginning. And you see, God showed Adam and Eve that there were two types of trees in the Garden of Eden. One was the tree of life, and the other one was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Bible scholars, many of whom are the devil's disciples, have hidden the truth about these trees for many centuries. The word tree in this context is being used in the same way that we use it when we talk about the family tree. The trees in the Garden of Eden represented two types of beings, or two types of people, and one was good to associate with, and the other God commanded us to stay away from. Adam and Eve didn't listen to God when he told them to stay away from the tree that looked good but was evil. And as a consequence, humans have been plagued by evil beings who are actually not human. You cannot be human, ladies and gentlemen, and be so evil at the same time that it makes you kill animals for sport, kidnap, torture, rape, and kill women, and put people in slavery, rape, torture, and then set them on fire. Finally, let's end this discussion by drilling down further on the word race, okay? So we can be clear about how the oppressors use racism as a system to keep human beings, or God's children on earth, in a fight to be free from satanic oppression. Now, according to the dictionary, the word race has many definitions. And one of the definitions is a class or kind of people unified by shared interests, habits, or characteristics. And by this definition, liberals and Republicans would be considered two different races of people, right? Republicans share the same political interests. They have a habit of watching Fox News, and their inherent characteristics are a contradiction in that they are pro-life and pro-death penalty. And recently they've revealed themselves to be liars when it comes to their love for the military, and lawless when it comes to law and order. And no one is this duplicitous, crafty, or evil except the devil and his disciples. Now, according to the Bible, the word race has 4 definitions, of which 2 come from the Hebrew and 2 come from the Greek lexicon. Okay, the Greek word for race is agon, which is defined as a struggle, fight, conflict, contest, or contention. The Hebrew word for race is ora, which is defined as a roadway, a path, highway, thoroughfare, manner of conduct, a traveler, a wayfaring man, troops, ranks, or childbirth, or the way of a woman. Now, this reminded me that Jesus said in John 4:16 or 14:6 that I am the way, or the path, to the truth and to the light. It also reminded me that the sons and daughters of God are in a constant struggle, fight, or conflict, or contest with the devil and his disciples. And it appears that the Bible in the dictionary is revealing to us that the word race identifies 2 classes of people that have been living on earth since the Garden of Eden, like 2 trees, one evil and one good. And these 2 classes of people are the proverbial tares that Jesus described in Matthew 13:25, that the enemy sowed in among the wheat. Now, one cannot tell the difference between the 2 unless their eyes have been enlightened. Therefore, Jesus said that we should not try to separate them, because he would take care of that task in the day of the great harvest. So remember, the word race identifies 2 classes of people, one evil and one good. Now, racism is the system that the devil established to oppress the good. Evil people understand that they would not be able to oppress us economically if we didn't buy into race as a construct of humanity. They know that they would not be able to survive on their own without the system of racism. Therefore, racism is a system designed to oppress good people or God's people economically. Race is a word in American vernacular that was created by the oppressors to designate which people would be systematically oppressed. Skin, hue or color is used to make the people or humans that are to be economically oppressed easily identifiable. Now, I would never venture to say that all white people are evil, but racism permeates every area of white culture, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, history, and medicine in order to block every avenue that a human might use to rise up economically through. If you are an African American male, it is important for you to understand that racism is an economic constraint that has nothing to do with race or color per se. Racism is a system that is designed to ensure that you remain at the bottom of the economic ladder, holding it for your oppressor to climb up on so he won't fall. It is critical that you understand that racism is an important element of capitalism. If racism did not exist, capitalism could not survive. Capitalism thrives on the labor and income of consumers, and this is why African Americans have been maneuvered into being America's largest consumer group. The word capitalism ends with the suffix ism because it is a belief system. A belief system is a devotion or adherence to a doctrine or tradition, and capitalism is a belief system that is no different than Buddhism, Judaism, or Catholicism. The word capital in this context means to be on top, and the true definition of capitalism then is the devotion or adherence to the doctrine and tradition or belief that certain people in the economy must always be on top. Conversely, it is also the belief that certain groups or people must always be on the bottom. Capitalism is an economic system that ensures certain people will always be on top, but in order for those people to remain on top, there must also be a system that ensures that certain people will always remain on the bottom. Racism is the system that ensures humans or people of color will always remain on the bottom. Again, racism permeates every area of white culture, including economics, education, entertainment, law, politics, religion, sex, history, and medicine, in order to block every avenue that a black man could use to rise up economically through. Now, if you're an African American male, it is critical for you to become a reader and to obtain a good basic knowledge in the aforementioned areas. And you don't have to be an expert in any of them, but you must have a good working knowledge in all of them. That is, if you intend to lead a family effectively. Because whenever your family has a problem, the answer is going to be in one of these areas, okay? Now, the only time in life that a man has a problem is when he doesn't have the right answer, okay? So you don't have to be an expert in any of them, but you must know enough about all of them in order to be able to overcome any problem that they may present to your family. Well, that's all that I have for now. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and share this video with your family and friends. And I'll be back with something new that nobody told you. Until then, remember that God loves you and I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I'll see you next time on Wealth Builder Seminars.